Hey all, hope you all are good. Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to discuss about Python operator in Airflow. So, in Apache Airflow, Python operator is a task that executes a Python callable, typically a function. It allows us to define custom logic or workflows using Python code within the Airflow DAG. This operator is quite versatile, enabling us to execute Python function, method, or even arbitrary code snippet as task within the DAG. So Python operator in Airflow can be imported from airflow.operators.python operator. I've created a sample DAG in which at first I've imported all the necessary libraries including the Python operator. Next I've defined the default arguments and created a DAG with DAG ID demo Python operator and passed the default arguments catch-up and schedule interval. Next I've created few tasks of type Python operator and passed the task ID and Python callable parameter to it. So now let's complete the functionality of this DAG to view the how Python operator works. So at first I will be reading the variable from Airflow variable view. So we can read the variable from the Airflow variable view using the variable.get method within our DAG. So let me create one object, and here we need to read the variable using .get method and pass the variable name to it. So if we go to the admin and click on variables, here you will see variables being created. So I want to read the value of key generic info. So if you click on edit record, here you can see value is in the form of dictionary, and I will be reading the value of each sub key value pair. So let's write our code. So at first, if the value is in the form of dictionary, we need to pass another parameter, that is deserialize JSON. So it will read the variable from Airflow variable view in form of JSON. Next we need to pass the variable name. So let me copy the variable name and let's read the value. So we will be reading it using var_1 dot get and then passing the key name. Next let me copy paste to read the other values. Next let's create a sample function, retrieve values function, and let's pass the parameter being read using variable.get method. And let's print the values of it. Now the function being created, we can call this function using the Python callable parameter. So this function even takes the argument, so we can pass the arguments both in form of list as well as in form of dictionary. So let's see how we can pass the arguments to the Python function. We can achieve it using op_args parameter and pass the list to it. So in task T1, I have called the function retrieve values and passed the arguments in form of list using parameter op_args. Now let's see how we can pass the parameters in form of dictionary to a function. So let me create another function, retrieve values_1 and pass the arguments in form of dictionary. and let's print it. Let's call this function again using Python callable parameter, and let's pass the arguments as dictionary using parameter op quarks, where underscore 1 stored the values that we have retrieved from value generic info in a form of key value pair. Here you can see the value of key generic info is in the form of dictionary. So we will be reading the same using op quarks parameter. So let me save it and upload this code to server where Airflow is running. Now let's go to the Airflow UI and let's refresh, and now let's open the demo Python operator. So here you can see two tasks is being present here. Since I haven't set any dependencies between them, so it will be executing in parallel. So let's run this tag and see the execution status and the logs for it. So if we go to the logs of task T1, here you can see the values being printed here, which is same being stored in value. Next, going to the logs of task T2, click on word wrap. Here you can see the values being printed here of key generic info. So here you can see by default the contexts are being passed without explicitly specifying the parameter provide context equal to true. So there is another way to call the Python function without using the Python operator, which is using TaskFlow API. So at first we need to import one library which is defined on line 5 from airflow.decorators import task. So whenever this decorator will be defined on top of any Python function, it will be considered as a task. So let's create another function and pass the parameter to it. So we will be just printing the value of var1. So this is the simple Python function, but if I want to convert to a task, we can achieve it using @task decorator, which is imported on line 5 as specified earlier. So what it does, it will convert this Python function into a task with by default task ID retrieve values 2, and we can call this function using retrieve and passing the variable name. Let's click on save and let's upload our code to server where Airflow is running. Now so our code is being updated. Now let's run our DAG. So here you can see the execution status of second run is completed. So here you can see by default this decorator gives the task ID name as the function name, and if I go to the logs of task retrieve values 2 and click on wrap, you can find the same information being present here. So as said earlier, by default task ID will be the same function name, but we can modify it by passing the task ID parameter. Let's give it a name task underscore 3, and let's even define the dependency. Let's define the dependencies between all the tasks being defined above using the chain function. So at first T1 task will run, then T2 task will run, and then our decorator will run. So what the chain function will do, it will run all the tasks in sequence. So let me upload my code and let's open the Airflow UI. Let's click on refresh, and here now you can see the task ID is updated to task 3. And now let's run our code. And if I go to the graph view, so you can see all the tasks are now in sequential order. And let's click on task T3 and go to logs. So here you can see the output being printed here. So as told earlier, in all the tasks created above, using Python operator, context is already being passed. But if we define the function using the @task decorator, the context is not being passed to the function. We can achieve this using this getCurrentContext function, which is imported from airflow.operator.python class. So let's define this function inside the decorator being defined. And let's call this function and let's print its values. Now let's upload our code to server and let's refresh. The code is being updated. Now let's run our DAG. So you can see the execution for the fourth run is started and now it's being completed. Now let's go to the output of task 3. So now you can see the context is being printed in the fourth run before the output of var1.